Welcome back, my Be Health Empowered family, to another episode of Excuse Me, Doctor. My name is Dr. Melissa Clark. Please call me Dr. Mel. I am excited, delightful, thankful to be here with y'all today, once again, to talk about what we do every time we have an episode of Excuse Me, Doctor, and that is to make sure that you have the information to empower you to make sound and wise health decisions for not just yourself, but also for your family and even for your community. So settle in with us right now. We have an incredible show. As we get into it, please remember to hit that subscribe button if you're checking us out on YouTube. And if you are on Facebook with us, please hit that like button. We really, really appreciate you for it. And if you are our ride or die, you know that I have to have my incredible co-host with me to make sure that this is an amazing week that we create for you with this show. So to kick us off, Lila Mays, Wayne Bruce, please come on in. We would love to see you.
What's up, Dr.
Hello. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. How y'all doing?
Good. Ready to get it on.
All right.
Good.
Ready for y'all bring the word from the streets and make sure that we keep it 100 as we move through the show.
Indeed. So here we are, the Monday after Thanksgiving.
We are here the Monday after Thanksgiving, whatever the next line is. And
how was
yours? How was yours, Lila?
My Thanksgiving, it was amazing. It was fantastic. It was good food, good fellowship. It was great.
That's wonderful. I know it was hard. Everybody I talked to today at work, it was hard for them to dust off them cobwebs and get back in the swing of things. But here we are. We are in the middle of the holidays. What's it called? Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Giving Tuesday. Here we are.
I'm black every day. I don't know about y'all. Not just on Friday. I'm black Monday through Sunday.
Well, that is good to know, but you're not associated with discounts every day. I'm just saying.
There's no discount here.
we know as we're going into this season, it's a lot. It's planning family gatherings, shopping, shoveling snow, decorating, getting people together around the table that may or may not see eye to eye on this, this place that we are in. So, it's a lot that we're about to go into. A lot. With the days getting shorter, let's not forget.
Right. It might, I think this is a perfect time for this show. My family and friends maybe could have benefited from it before Thanksgiving because we got into a little something right at the end there. But I think we all kind of need a toolkit to navigate the holidays. So
really,
that's what we're going to get into today. Yeah.
Toolkit. Well, it couldn't be better because, I tell people everybody is joyous and happy during this time period. And I'm not necessarily joyous and happy. Now, I am happy and thankful. I'm thankful. But, this time period, I had so many people in my life, in my personal life that have moved on from this plane during this time period and some tragedies during this time period that sometimes I'm not in that spirit. It's just not the greatest place for me some days.
Well, you're not alone, Wayne. And that's why we're doing this show, surviving the holidays, your holiday mental health toolkit. That's what we're talking about tonight. Mm-hmm. We're going to flesh out the joys, the challenges of the holidays, and really come up with that holiday survival toolkit that everybody can use. So it's going to be a good show. I want to make sure y'all stay tuned because right now we're going to do the weekly recap, but we have more after that on the holiday toolkit.
All right.
Did you call? You rang. I'm like Lurch on this. You rang. So here we go, Dr. Mel. First things first. What's the diabetes tool that we or you may be missing? That somebody may be missing this diabetes tool. What is it?
Right. Well, if you have diabetes or a loved one has diabetes, this is something that you should definitely know about. If you have problems, if you're on insulin, or if you've had, episodes where your blood sugar went really low, like dangerously low, then you might need something called a continuous glucose monitor, short CGM, right? It's a
Mhm.
tiny device, sticks onto your body and gives real-time blood sugar reading. So you can know minute to minute what is going on with your blood sugar, if it's high, if it's low, all that.
Yeah, most people I see with them, and I've had it from time to time because, it's actually a part of a weight loss system for me. Stick it on the back of their forearm, not forearm, but back of their bicep, you know, in the back part of their arm, upper
The
arm,
back of their tricep.
There
tricep.
you go.
I said that.
Get the anatomy right. There you go, Lila. I
Come
see
on, Lila. I didn't stay that long in anatomy. You just want to show off.
No, no.
They stick it on their tricep behind their bicep.
Right.
Okay.
And then what
All
does
right.
it do?
And it reads, some of them have devices that go along with it, but a lot of them now you just stick your phone to the back,
Mhm.
and it reads your blood sugar and lets you know how to keep it within range, right?
Right. Right.
Okay.
So you can in real time see, how what you're eating is affecting your blood sugar and make decisions that help you stick and have better control of your diabetes, develop less complications over time. And how this relates to people of color, a new study shows that Black and Hispanic patients and underinsured patients are least likely to be prescribed a continuous glucose monitor by their doctor, even if they qualify.
Wow.
Wow.
So, and there are different criteria to qualify: your age, what kind of diabetes you have, whether it's type 1, type 2, whether you're on insulin or not. So all those things kind of go into it, what kind of insurance you have that covers it. But if you have diabetes, you should specifically ask your doctor, hey, do I qualify for a continuous glucose monitor? That is part of advocating for yourself. And if they
Mhm.
say no, ask them, well, why not? So that they can explain to you why you don't qualify.
Because
Okay.
once again, we have to advocate, like Dr. Clark said, for ourselves. Dr. Mel with the advocates. Wayne
That's
Bruce
right.
with the avocado.
Okay.
Okay.
Avocados are healthy. I don't know what the connection is there, but
Advocate
hey,
avocado.
that's the bottom line.
Right.
Y'all know this.
All right. Moving on to number 2, weight loss drugs and alcohol. I love that this isn't a recap because actually after our last show, this came up in our sort of debrief. And in full transparency, I'm taking a little weight loss medication. And I was telling Dr. Mel that one of the byproducts benefits of this medication is I don't have any real appetite for alcohol. And I like prosecco and champagne, but I don't have the urge to drink it. What's the connection, Dr. Mel?
Well, thank you for sharing that, Lila. I'm sure, people can benefit from, you're letting everyone know that. But apparently, people on weight loss medicines can lose their desire for alcohol. There was a study that just came out of Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit. It showed that there were about 7,500 people that they looked at who were in a weight loss program who were drinking alcohol at the beginning of the program, but
Mm.
after starting on an obesity drug, began drinking less alcohol as a result.
Wow.
Yeah. So were there groups who were more likely to slow down their drinking in this study?
Yeah. So it showed that women were more likely than men.
Mhm.
Those who
Mhm.
were at higher weights were more likely, and then those who drank more at baseline um, were also more likely to cut down or eliminate alcohol consumption altogether. So we know that part of the way the medications work is to lower the rewarding effects of food. So it looks like that might also be true for alcohol as well. So
It's so
just something
interesting.
to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm not necessarily, we're not necessarily advocating for any particular
Right.
weight loss medication. It's important that you talk to your doctor about the pros and cons for you, but it is important, I think, to note that that might be a side benefit that wasn't anticipated.
Yeah. On Thanksgiving, my sister made this delicious bourbon cranberry cocktail. Everybody said it was yummy.
And you had, you're like, no
I
interest.
tasted it. I'm like, yeah, it's yummy.
So I just want to thank you for being fully transparent, because we've talked in our meetings, and we're going to follow my journey,
Yes.
on my weight loss journey in the new year.
Yes.
And
All right.
it will include a couple things, a couple, whether it's one or the other. We're not going to call any brand names, but we're
Yeah.
going to follow it.
All right.
Because it's that time. And I don't drink heavy as it is, but I do like certain things that I drink.
Mm-hmm.
And we won't get into those. I want to take a whole, so I'm looking forward to that. And we'll follow that for you here on Excuse Me, Doctor. All right.
All right.
That's what's up.
Fantastic.
So that segues perfectly into a fitness journey, just a fitness journey, how important it is. And Dr. Mel, I recently read that being fit has some benefits to fight our dementia risk.
Absolutely. We don't know what causes dementia, but we do know these two things. There's some people who are at a higher inherited risk of dementia because of their genes.
Mhm.
And we also know that being inactive puts you at higher risk for dementia. So a new study has shown that being fit is associated with a lower dementia risk, even in people who have a genetic predisposition. So, the normal thinking is, oh, if if I have the genes for something, there's nothing I can do. That is absolutely not true. It's how your genes react with your environment. And this is a perfect
Mhm.
example that there are things that you can do that lower your risk.
Wow.
Okay.
That's very important, because everybody is very scared of having dementia. And
Hmm.
how did they define what is fit? Is it running? Is it running a marathon? Is it being able to walk up steps? Is it, how did they
Yeah.
define being fit?
Great question. So what they did is they had people sit on a stationary bike and go at a constant moderate intensity for 6 minutes and then measured how much oxygen they consume. So 6
Mm.
minutes isn't a long time of steady pedaling, and they're not having you pedal like to exhaustion, right?
Not
And
like
they
on the
found
Peloton.
not like on a Peloton. And they found that for all age groups, 30 or everybody from 39 to 70 who was in the study, the more fit they were, the better their cognitive function. Cognitive function meaning your ability to solve problems, to think,
Mhm.
to execute plans across the board.
Okay.
Listen, I've been working out with the senior citizens up the street at the YWCA in my
Okay.
neighborhood.
All right.
So we're working it out. we do
That's good.
we do low impact aerobics and line dancing every week.
Oh, that's
So
wonderful.
yeah,
And
and
fun.
we are, huh?
And fun.
Yeah, and fun. Yeah, so there's
Yeah.
some
Right.
fun ways to get your fitness in.
All right.
So
Well, that
boy,
is the recap for this week.
that is it. That is the recap.
What y'all think? What you got for us, Lila?
Well, we asked the people, we went to social media and we asked the people how likely they are to follow health advice from social media. So TikTok, Instagram, I'm not gonna call out that other one.
Okay.
Disclaimer: the thoughts and views of the
Fan
producers are not
base.
necessarily.
Right.
But if there was a resounding 100% said they do not uh, follow advice from social media. However, the caveat is if they see an article or a video regarding some health information, most people will go and do their own research, but not necessarily taking what they have listened to or watched on social media as information they should necessarily follow.
Wow. Well, that's you might not have talked to a lot of adolescents and young people, because
I didn't. These
studies
are more,
show,
yeah.
yeah, that social media is the go-to for that age group when it comes to health information. And there was a study that was done that showed on a platform that shall go unnamed, that falsehoods were 70% more likely to be spread than the truth. So falsehoods spread further, faster, deeply, and more broadly. So it's well, I'm curious to know what our audience, do you take, advice that you see on Instagram or any of the other social media platforms? Put it in the chat.
Put it in
Maybe even
chat. Let
share
us know.
something that you think um, was legit. So let us know. So thank you, Lila. That's what y'all think. We're gonna check back in as the show goes on. I'm relying on y'all to bring it back once we finish our discussion. I'll see y'all in a little bit, because we're gonna talk about your mental health holiday toolkit. The days are getting shorter, the sun is shining less, it's colder, people are having stress because of the holidays, or it could be, that you're overspending and there's financial stress. You might be missing a loved one who was with you last previous holidays and aren't with you now. So how do you keep it all together? We're doing a special episode tonight to give you tips and tools to have in your toolkit so that you can navigate this holiday season and keep your peace and harmony intact. And we have an incredible guest to talk with tonight, Dr. Robert Fullilove. He is the Associate Dean for Community and Minority Affairs. He is a professor of clinical socio-medical sciences and co-director of the city's research group, all at Columbia University. And on top of all that, he is an ordained minister. He's authored numerous articles on minority health, public health, and disease prevention. Welcome, Dr. Fullilove. We're delighted to have you here tonight.
The pleasure is mine. Glad to be here.
All right. Well, let's get into it, because I really want folks to leave our discussion and feel empowered when it comes to what is their plan to navigate this holiday season. So let's just start off with setting the table and talking about what are some of the challenges that the holidays bring when it comes to mental health specifically.
Well, I think you mentioned a couple that are really to underscore. This is a period that's supposed to be joyful, but for many of us, this is the end of the year and joy is a little hard to find. So there's a sense in which we feel out of kilter. We're not connected to the holiday, the way the rest of the world is. We might feel slightly out of sorts. I think it's important for folks to acknowledge that it's okay not to be full of joy at this time of year, that it is very difficult. We have stresses, we have strains, and the finances that are associated with Christmas. This is not about our Savior. This is about money. And I think we have to be clear that whatever our religious sentiments might be about the importance of the holiday, they get quickly buried by the expectations of kids, family, and friend, that this is a time when other things, gifts and goodies, are supposed to happen. It's okay for us to acknowledge that this is a difficult period. And it's okay for us to acknowledge that if we're not feeling joyous, that's okay too. There are good reasons for it. We needn't blame ourselves if we're not quite in the Christmas spirit the way everybody else is.
Right. And, I mentioned too that the days are getting shorter. So from a biology standpoint, a lot of us get something called seasonal affective disorder, right? Where because there's less light, the days are shorter, that trigger that we get to have energy because of sunlight and being outside is gone as the days are getting shorter. So it's compounding all those things that you just excellently ran down. What are some of the signs that you might not be handling holiday stressors well?
Well, I think the ones that I pay most attention to are the ones that are described by what I call set: stress, expectations, and time. I don't know about you, but Christmas is a time when people have very great expectations about things happening at a certain moment. If you're like most Black families, you might have a ritual about Christmas Eve, a ritual about Christmas morning. You most certainly will have a ritual around Thanksgiving. And because those are things that have high expectations, the minute something starts to go wrong, what are we going to do? This is a moment when people who are trying their best to engage in a process of wellness pay a lot of attention to the internal signals that their bodies are giving them. Am I impatient? Am I losing my temper easily? Am I frustrated? Am I wishing this would all go away? I mean, I think there are many ways in which you want to monitor how you are taking life around you with much greater precision than might be the case in other parts of the year. So, the first thing to note is, am I doing things differently than I usually do? And the minute that becomes clear, this is the moment when we stop, we step back, we acknowledge I'm under a lot of stress. And sometimes just recognizing that that's what's happening makes it possible for us to control it better.
Hmm. So let's talk about stress a little bit and unpack that, right? So I often talk about stressors versus feeling stressed. Can you sort of break down the difference between stress and stressors?
Stress for me is the impact of external circumstances on my body. I will have a fight or flight reflex. I'm someone who lives with hypertension. So I'm very aware of what happens when my heart starts to race, when I start feeling down, when I'm, not really feeling quite like myself. Those are the body states that we often want to pay attention to. A
Mhm.
stressor would be something that is creating that. I know that as someone who has kids and has grandkids, that one of the worst expectations is a child who's really expecting that Christmas is going to be something magical. And then when it turns out to be something less, there is a moment when all of a sudden it starts to impact us. So that notion that there are expectations we have about how this season is going to treat us, when those expectations are not met, those can be stressors. And the first thing we'll note is that we start to feel not quite ourselves in moments like this. And because it's a time when everybody else is trying their best to be happy, we'll feel even more as if this is something that we should be paying a lot more attention to. We'll literally have an increase in stress levels because we're not doing what we know we're supposed to. We're not
Mhm.
meeting the expectations that others might have for us. You want to be aware of those things. You want to be able
Right.
to step and you want to say, ooh, I know what's happening. Let me slow down.
Right. No, I think that's great. And, you know, we know that these external stressors, like you said, can create situations in our spirit, in our emotional level, and then physically where our blood pressures go up, our heart races. It can affect our sleep. It can affect our appetite, either eating more or eating less. All these things can impact us negatively and play out in terms of, leading to chronic diseases, or if we already have a chronic disease, worsening. So it's really important. All those things that you mentioned in terms of paying attention to what your body is doing is really, really key. You also mentioned family, right? Stress can be for especially high at the holidays. That's one aspect of it, meeting the expectations for material things that, your relatives, your kids might have. There's also the family stress of people getting together and having different political views, or just having different views in general about life and family dynamics. What are some of the tools that individuals can use as they get together with their families that they might love these people, but they might not like them a lot? What are some of the things, strategies for navigating that, getting together at the holidays?
Well, one of the most important strategies is if yours is a family where you kind of know when people get together, you can almost predict who's going to say what to whom that's going to result in some kind of explosion. How about we acknowledge that? How about we anticipate that? How about we make a point of setting ground rules? It might sound as if that's a party breaker, but at some levels, if you put everyone on notice, I know what's going to happen here. Let's all do our best to do X, Y, and Z. There is typically one person in the house, one person in the family who can say that. And when that set of words is uttered, people feel compelled to obey. In other words, it's okay to remind people, hey, we're adults. How about we act like adults? And let's think before we just have something spurred out. One of the things that I think it's really important to mention that comes from the conversation you had with your colleagues at the very beginning, we drink a lot during Christmas.
Mhm.
There are so many different alcoholic beverages that are part of the
Yep.
holiday. This is the moment when a lot of people say, oh my God, I can't stand this. I need a drink.
Right. Yep.
Are we aware of how many of the problems occur during the holidays when so-and-so, or maybe even us, suddenly discovers that we're using alcohol to help us deal with stress instead of finding some more rational, some more mature way of dealing with it? This is a moment when you want to be aware of alcohol consumption. You want to be
Mhm.
very clear about not only your drinking habits, but the habits of others. It's not that you're supposed to be a cop, but do be aware that if it looks as if this is one of those moments when maybe there's a little too much flowing, maybe this is a moment where we take that stuff away. We start cutting
Mhm.
people off, and we start reminding people that, hey, we're here to have a good time, not to get plastered.
Right.
I know in some families that is often something that has to be done. I'm going to bet that there are a lot of folk in the audience who are also approaching this because they're in recovery. So you're
Mhm.
well aware of the fact that this is one of your triggers. You're going to be in a setting where you've been very good about controlling whatever it is that you tend to do in excess, but all of a sudden you'll be present in a moment when everybody seems to be saying, hey, it's okay. Some of
Mhm.
your relatives may say, oh, come on, it's just a glass. It can't possibly
Yeah.
hurt. You know better.
Right.
You know better. And this is a moment to be particularly conscious of the fact that if you're a person in recovery and you're in one of these settings, that this is a moment when you have to be particularly on guard. It is not a moment to relax. The way to get through this stressfully without falling off the wagon is to be very conscious of what you do and be very
Mhm.
conscious of how much the stress that is being imposed on you by others might be impacting your desire to take a drink.
Right.
I think a lot of settings, when folk are really aware that that is a potential trigger point for a problematic evening with the family, this is the one thing that we're probably in the best position to control. And if we're aware of it, I'm betting we can do it and do it
Yeah.
successfully.
And I think a lot of people, they equate family gatherings or friends gatherings with a reason to drink, right? And they also look at alcohol as a way to relieve stress. So like you said, it's a potential um powder keg, right? And alcohol sort of helps to light the fuse and get things going. So just being mindful and even setting that as a ground rule ahead of time, I think, as you mentioned, could be one of those potential ground rules to discuss.
Very good.
Um yeah. So, the opposite is true. We talk about family gatherings, they're the joy of family gatherings, but there's also sometimes a feeling of isolation. It could be due to the loss of a loved one, divorce, empty nesters. What are some of the tools to have in our toolkit when we're dealing with the challenges of well-being, challenges to our well-being that comes about as a feeling of isolation, whatever the reason is?
Yeah. So I think part of it is the pressure we put on ourselves to perform. Everybody knows that you lost X in your life. And so there's this whole notion where we're going to be in the family and we're going to look like our old selves. We owe it to everybody to be on our best behavior. I think it's okay for folk to acknowledge that if it's difficult, that there's no point in trying to cover it up, because I think our effort to mask our true feelings actually makes things worse. So I think it's
Mhm.
okay for folk to let people know if it's becoming a problem that you're having a moment. Because I know, especially in the Black family, there's always somebody who's going, baby, it's all right. Think about it, slow down. There's always somebody, I think, in our family who's really tuned into us in moments like this. You don't have to feel that this is a crisis you have to face on your own. If you know that that person or persons like that are part of the gathering, make a point of letting them know how happy you are to see them, and let them know one of the reasons you're happy is because you know in moments like this, it's really good to have them around. I think that
Mhm.
kind of gentle, affirming, encouraging that takes place that allows people in family to literally be family is something that we should emphasize. That it's okay to acknowledge the folk, I'm not feeling that great. I'm happy to be here. Help me out if you think I'm in trouble, because I think that's exactly what families do at their best. They help out, they step in, and they make sure that we're not alone in a moment when what we're supposed to do is share the joy of being together.
Right, right. There are also those circumstances where you don't have family around. How can people potentially create their own families, maybe, or create that sense of connectedness, let's say at Christmas? I mean, or during the holiday season in general. Is there a role for volunteering, for example?
Well, certainly the folk who spend Christmas, for example, at a homeless shelter, helping pass out food, helping feed folk, being in a place where kids are present and you're really doing your best to help the kids feel better. This is one of the ways in which there is a certain call to be selfless. That's also part of the holiday message. And for some of us, that might in fact be the moment where the way to feel good about our own situation is to be in a place where we can help others enjoy everything that Christmas is supposed to be about. So I think the idea that volunteering, uh, being of service to others, that's certainly a part of the Black tradition. And I think
Mm.
embracing that and seeing that as something that's not just helping those that you're working with, but may also help ourselves is something that is a value that we really should support.
Right. No, thank you for bringing that out. And, we talked about some of the things to know that you might, n- but that you might be letting the stress overwhelm you, right? Some of the physical things, some of the behavior changes, like maybe drinking more or being more isolated. When do you know that it might be time to seek mental health counseling or treatment? Not maybe not just at the holidays, but just any time of the year.
As you can well imagine, in the Black community, that's always been a real issue for us. Going all the way back to slavery, I think folk forget that there was a moment when there was actually a psychiatric diagnosis for an African American slave who wanted to be free. They thought that that meant you were crazy. Okay.
Wow.
Let's be clear that that is part of our history in the sense that we might not have been able to say the name of the illness. But the idea that for us there was something particularly damning about, for example, not being in your head in the right way, has meant that we've always really struggled to acknowledge when we're blue, depressed,
Mm,
worried, anxious, what have you. We're, especially, I'm thinking now of Black men, supposed to man up. We're supposed to do what we can to be strong. In other words, we are often victimized by images we have of ourselves and our strength. And I think the most important point, and I'm speaking here as a guy who was married to a psychiatrist for 30 years, is to acknowledge, number one, that we aren't feeling ourselves. That's the hardest thing to do. The first and most important lie is the one we tell ourselves about how well we're feeling. If you
right.
can accept and acknowledge that that's not true, literally, that is the beginning of finding a way out. Right now, we live in a modern world. Everybody who's watching us on a computer can easily go to Google and suddenly discover that if you do Black mental health help, there are thousands of links that
Mm,
literally are going to be very useful in helping us go from I know I need help to actually finding it. And I'm going to suggest that if the beginning of this is simply acknowledging I'm not okay, then I think the rest is becoming a lot easier in this modern information age where a link to help is a lot easier to find than was the case even as recently as 10 years ago.
And you mentioned, African American community and our history around mental health, which I had heard that before, but I had forgotten what you said about, um, you know, wanting to be free as a mental health diagnosis, right? So how accessing mental health might be considered not helpful. But then there's also the stigma that is associated with it. What are some things that we might be able to do as within our family or within our community to destigmatize seeking help, seeking mental health, and encouraging individuals to prioritize their mental health?
Well, I'm very interested, and you and I both work in this particular domain, in the power of the church to help us as a community accept that this is okay. That not only is it okay to acknowledge that we may be struggling with issues for whom, for which rather a professional might be really of great use, but I believe that mental health succeeds best when people are not only working on their own issues, but when they're in the presence of community that is supportive, that is
Mhm.
helpful, that is not judgmental, and that does whatever is necessary to make sure that when people start on a journey like this, that they're supported. So the biggest worry is when we think this is all on us. This is something I have to do by myself. I think any
Mhm.
psychiatrist who works in this arena is going to be very clear. No, if you're able to be with others, a lot of what will help support you is literally what comes from the people who are surrounding you, who work with you, who love you, who care about you, and making sure that we're open to them and to the power that they have to sort of help us out is also really important. Too often we feel like, no, this is my battle. I've got to basically deal with this on my own, when it becomes very clear that we are typically strongest when we have the support of others. And with that support, are able to do things that we might not otherwise be able to risk on our own.
Mhm.
So I'm very
No.
big about, for example, getting the church more directly engaged. And I'm really pleased to see how many pastors at this point in the 21st century are really accepting the role that pastoral counseling can be a part of your witness, part of your mission for the community.
Mhm.
Because as soon as we make it clear that pastor says, look, if you're having troubles, don't just rely on the Bible or your faith to be enough. Make sure that you're also seeking help because so much of it is available. And if you need the help and support of a congregation, we're here for you. I know a couple of pastors who've done that, and the results have been really terrific. And because I think you have a perfect forum to sort of send that message, let me suggest that once again, this is not just what we're trying to convince your viewers to see. For those who are in a position to act on this, I think this is one of the most important contributions that we can make to the general health, the general mental health of our community.
Yeah. No, I think that's an excellent point. I mean, there has been an evolution, I think, in religious thinking somewhat, right? It's not all the way, but an understanding that there's mental health and that there's spiritual health, and that both have to be tended to separately. It's not enough to say, oh, you just need to pray or you just need Jesus, right? That they're actually mental health techniques, strategies that can be helpful to really address some of the areas that relying strictly on scripture or a message in the sermon might not necessarily um, address fully. And then outside of the church, you already mentioned, there are communities online, ways that you can go about getting help when you need mental health. And I should also mention the 988 number that people can call if there's a crisis to be connected to mental health services that will be appropriate for what they need. So 988, relatively new emergency number that everybody can call. Um, it looks like it's actually time to bring back Lila and Wayne and see if we have any questions, comments in the chat. I would love to know what you, the listening audience, what y'all are doing, what you're taking away as a strategy to put in your toolkit, or maybe one that you already have that we haven't mentioned. Throw it in the chat so that we can surface it, talk about it, and add it to the whole, add it to all the tools that we already have. So what y'all see, what do y'all see out there, Lila and Wayne?
Wayne, you got something? I do if you don't.
Go ahead, Lai.
This is for Dr. Fullilove. I just wanted to come back to a point that you just made about how important it is that our um, churches also really sort of prescribe regular counseling in addition to faith-based activities. And so I know there are a lot of churches. I'm in Los Angeles, and there are a lot of churches that actually have counseling centers on site with licensed practitioners. So I just think that's a really important point. I do think that religious thinking is evolving and has been over the years. So I'm happy to say that I have seen many churches really, really lean into psychology as a way of support.
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile pointing out. I spent a lot of time as a member of a commission at the National Institutes of Health. It was the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine.
Hmm.
I was fascinated by the statistic that suggested that in our community, one of the first things that folk do when they get bad news, for example, a cancer diagnosis, we pray on it. And then we
Yeah,
go to pastor. So
yeah.
why not accept that as being what we think is our mental health solution? Why not
Mm.
accept the notion that pastors can often say prayer should definitely be a part of the way in which you manage whatever crisis of the spirit may be a part of making you feel badly. But there
Yes.
are other things that you can do. Do not leave it to your prayers or God alone when so much that He has put in the universe is out here for you to take advantage of. So why not
Mhm.
do that? When I've seen pastors give that message, it's like a burden has been lifted on off the shoulders of many. And
Yeah.
to the notion that why isn't my prayer enough, which is often one of the ways in which, maybe you're dealing with something that's a little bit more than you can handle. When prayer is,
Right.
how about we acknowledge that, yeah, maybe I do need something else, and that maybe God is answering my prayer by saying, this ain't all. You could do
Right.
more.
Right.
Exactly.
And I've equipped doctors down there with y'all to support.
Right.
Amen.
Doctors, counselors, social workers,
Right.
licensed therapists, the whole
Right.
gamut. Yep.
Um, yeah. So I see a couple of questions, Wayne. I saw one from Yvonne, but now, oh, here it is. How does our
Own traditions.
how do our own traditions such as Kwanzaa help people build family and community?
Great
Well,
question.
at least in my expectation, that's exactly what we don't have these days.
Hmm.
Are we aware of the fact that 1 out of every 5 Americans moves every year? We're no longer a community that has 3 generations living under one roof. In
Yeah.
fact, the ideal is you're hoping your kids leave at 18. So all of a sudden, the idea that we're somehow all together, that we're in this mess at the same time, no, that turns out not to be the case. So Kwanzaa is all about no, you do have a self identity, but you also have a community identity. Supporting that is a way in which we acknowledge we're not alone in all this. And again, to the degree that Dr. Mel pointed this out, this sense that I'm in this all by myself is often the core element that is a part of so many mental illnesses, means that the counter is to be in a place, a community, where what we're emphasizing is that we are linked one with each other. And that
Yeah.
link not only makes it powerful, it is also a way in which we resist some of the problems that are often presented in the form of depression,
Yeah.
stress, or anxiety. And I think Kwanzaa helps remind us that we're more than just the self. We are also part of a tradition that goes back to the most important continent on planet Earth and the one that was the seat of all human beings. And I think
Right.
being reminded of that is always good, especially in these
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
difficult times we're going through now.
Yeah.
Always.
We have to lean into the principles of Kwanzaa. If we just lean into those principles, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Right. And also too, you mentioned the importance of community. And I was thinking, the internet can be a source
Sure.
of building communities, but it also, on the flip side, can be a source of enforced isolation. Because
Mhm.
if you are, doom scrolling, as they say on social media, you're not really building community.
Right.
You're actually giving yourself a false sense of community that doesn't really nourish that need for emotional connectivity.
So,
So,
Dr.
yeah.
So, Dr. Mel, that leads into a post that we have up in in the chat by Rhoda Lawrence. She says turning off the news and putting down social media are both extremely helpful. And that whole social media thing, like if I see another influencer on social media talking about Bali and everything, how does all the holiday related media consumption impact our health, our mental health? How does that happen?
Well, number one, nothing is worse than the commercialization of Christmas and facing the holidays with no cash. How much more do we need to really feel awful? It's very clear that again, let me do the gender thing. For many, many men, the whole idea is that Christmas is the time when you are supposed to be Santa Claus. I hope I'm not revealing anything by saying that out loud, but you know where I'm going. And then the recognition that, yeah, Santa Claus gets all kinds of stuff to the people that are loved, and I don't have anything. And of all the things that I think of, certainly with my buddies, the ones that I worry about most are the ones who are feeling that Christmas is going to be a time when they're going to be judged as being too little, too late.
Yeah.
That they didn't have enough to really make the holiday what it's supposed to be. This is where the expectations really get us into trouble and are often the source of our stress, anxiety, and depression. So recognizing that some of that is a function of watching too much media, where advertisements are slung at us every 30 seconds, and this idea that we should be buying, we should be consuming, we should be grabbing, that's something that develops a set of messages that I think we can simply turn off. If you don't hear them, they're not going to stress you. And sometimes for many of us, that's the most important thing we can do. Just say, okay, I've had enough. Let me go do something else. You remember there was a time people used to read?
Remember there was a time when TV would go off?
Right. It would go fuzzy.
Right. But I think also too, setting up the counter narrative within your family group, whatever that is, whether it's friends, whether it's family, whether it's with your kids, setting up the principles of what the holidays stand for, right? And really socializing that and going back to that and making that your touchstone to counter the commercialism that we experience, I think is also a good strategy and something to have in our toolkit, because that can also help to address the expectations.
Right.
Yeah.
And let me just be clear. The biggest enemy of all that is Scrooge. There are so many kids who say, ooh, you're being Scrooge. So I think the message is one that has to be delivered, but it also has to be delivered with great care because kids are waiting for it. They're expecting it. And yes, I am isolating the youth as being a particular source of stress in all of this because Christmas very much has been about them. And one, as an adult, can certainly feel badly if for whatever reason we know the expectations that the kids have are not expectations that we're going to be in a position to meet. So the idea that we can say, hey, you need to tone this down, you're right. That's a rational way of dealing with it. But I think it becomes very, very difficult. And I'm going to suggest that maybe we should not be the people who deliver that form of bad news. I think if there are, no, seriously, I mean, the whole point is like, oh, Dad, there you go. All of you who have kids who suddenly know there's a moment when the kids are looking at you, but the light has gone out in their eyes. My attempt, Dr. Mel, to give that message to my kids, that was when it happened. It was like, so I think it's the right message, but I think finding a way to deliver it so it's not us being the source of the bad news is also something that I think is worth considering. There are all kinds of positive messages out there. And again, if people are stuck on media, then find media that supports that. Don't let us be the negative voice that becomes the easiest to react to.
Right. Right.
I think one thing in terms of expectations, like certainly we have to manage our own expectations, not just the expectations we have of our parents, our partners, those people. And one of the things that I lean into, I'm going to say that again, is comparison is the thief of joy. As long as I'm not considering what's happening around me and I am present in what's happening in my space, I'm good. When I start comparing myself to other people, that's a joy stealer. So I just wanted to say that to folks.
I love that. Comparison is a joy stealer.
It is.
I'm going to quote that. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I
We're
won't
gonna make a
quote it
little
just
we're gonna
like
make
that.
bumper stickers out of that.
I won't quote it just like that, but I'm going to be close. Fantastic, Lila. We have another message from Tony Smith. He asks, how important is it that we do our research, our serious research into from whom and where we seek guidance when we're going through our struggles?
Very good. There are indeed a lot of quacks out there. And there are a lot of, I think we can use the term false prophets as well. So certainly when one is dealing with somebody who's licensed to practice anything that looks like therapy, there are all kinds of ways in which we can determine what's this person's training, what's their rating, what do others say. I've noticed that this is definitely true with physicians, that there are all kinds of things that let you know. You look up a doctor's name, and almost immediately you'll see something else that says, rate this doctor. So it's a way of saying that if we're concerned that maybe what we're getting is not the real deal, there are all sorts of ways for us to confirm that the person we're asking to help us does in fact have the credentials, does have the history, and does have what I would consider to be the support of the professional community that says, yeah, this is somebody who's okay. Those who have bad ratings, you can almost immediately be clear that's somebody I'm supposed to stay away from. And because those things are out there, this is a moment when they should be consulted.
Yeah. And there are websites like Health Grades or ZocDoc. There's ncqa.org where you can go on and you can look up specifically physicians. So in this sense, psychiatrists, that you could look up their ratings and understand how they might be rated. So to Dr. Fullilove's point, there are definitely tools online where you can get feedback and understand standing in the community in terms of how they professional community in terms of their ratings. And in some instances, you can even go to the specialty society, whether it be, for example, a social worker or a licensed clinical therapist, and research that particular individual in terms of their credentials.
All righty.
I remember going online and looking up tools for Black mental health and getting literally tens of thousands of links. And many of the most important are by well-certified organizations that have a very good history of working in the community. I think what we're trying to suggest is that there's a lot of trusted material that's out there, and it simply needs our desire to search it out and then to take advantage of it once we get it.
And that reminds me, let me just do one shout out to the Black Mental Health Alliance, BMHA. They have a website where you can go and you can actually call them or go on their website and say what you need. And they can, if you're looking specifically for a Black mental health provider in a certain zip code, they can help direct you to someone who they've vetted, who's in there, who they can suggest that you see. So definitely Black Mental Health Alliance, BMHA.
BMHA. All righty. Lila?
All right.
Yeah, I have one last question for folks with pre-existing mental health conditions. What steps can they take to prevent setbacks during the holidays? I mean, we're talking about counselors and that kind of thing, but are there specific steps they can take to sort of set themselves up for success?
Well, again, it sort of depends on where people are in their therapeutic journey. But a couple of things that we've mentioned definitely bear repeating. Number one, alcohol. I don't know of anybody who is going through that sort of process who's going to benefit from drinking a lot during the holidays. And because there's so much that sort of urges us to do that, that's the one thing that I think everybody would agree. By all means, let's avoid that. The other thing is we've done this with the notion that people are aware of the fact that this is a stressful time. All right, if you've acknowledged that we're about to enter a stressful period, then part of what happens if you're in therapy is that you're already thinking about what do I do to prepare. I'm going to bet that for each individual, because it will vary depending on who we're talking about. For each individual, there are things that have been a part of your process that you know that you're supposed to do. So maybe this is the moment to say, you know what you're supposed to do. How about you do it?
Double down.
Right. Okay.
So I think we have gotten some incredible tools for our toolkit. We've talked about knowing what your triggers are. We're talked about some of the signs that you know that you're not handling stress well. We've talked about expectation setting, right? Being proactive before holiday gatherings. We've talked about as a solution to isolation and feeling isolated, reaching out to others and volunteering. We have talked about making sure that you know ways to reach out for mental health help when you need it. So we have a lot of tools that we've covered. I don't know if we've put any in the chat, but if you have some that we haven't hit on, please throw them in there so that folks watching this episode moving forward can also benefit from specific ones that you might have that you found helpful. So thank you so much, Dr. Robert Fullilove. You've been a wealth of knowledge for guiding us through this discussion. Really appreciate you. Lila Mays and Wayne Bruce, of course. Thank you. Comparison is a joy stealer. We're going to see y'all next time. And until then, be wise, be well, and be health empowered.